How's it going? Happy Wednesday. So good to have you here. And I'm going, as you can tell, I'm going solo today. Um, Jessica is not with us. She is on a trip. Just for the afternoon. And so I'm doing this solo. She may jump in on chat if she's able to, but if not, no worries. So yeah, I'm just gonna fill in today and talk to you. Um, I'll still wait a couple minutes and start at 4. I asked Jess to send this out because since she isn't here and I had uh, checked with her to see if it was cool if we started an hour earlier because I need to get some things done. And uh, so here I am. It's good to be here. So I'll go ahead and start because if you see if you look at the thumbnail for the live stream, it's talk about thought crime and has a little picture of me in thought criminal, my wanted sign for thought criminals. And what got me thinking about that today is I was listening to some live streams and as I was driving around town at work, and and it's just interesting how many times it comes up that the uh, this idea in Christianity that I was obviously believed in and bought into, but I just never thought of it from the perspective of how we're really being um, asked to believe something based on a set amount of information, whatever that is, and it's different for everybody how much information and access an individual gets about Christianity, um, and then we're asked to believe that in the two options in Christianity are that we believe in Jesus and God's plan of redemption through Christ, and that He is the only way, and we are sinners and we need a Savior, and we need to believe all of that. And then, if so, we say, I believe, and then we are forgiven and we get to go to whatever uh, that conception of heaven is, because there's so many different, depending on which Christian you talk to, the idea of heaven's all going to be different. If you don't believe, and this cannot even be like so often when it's presented as not believing is like some kind of violent act or some rebellious act, or man, I want to sin or I want to live a certain way and I don't want a God ruling over me. And I remember thinking that way because that's just all I ever heard people talk about. And I never stopped to think or dawned on me that people could not believe just because they're presented with the information and it just doesn't make sense. And it doesn't, the evidence or the story or the Bible or whatever they're presented with when it comes to Christianity, they just don't believe it. Not because they don't want to follow God or something. It's just like, oh, there's a lot of things in there to consider. That someone rose from the dead, that one person that all the world was condemned by God because we were created with sin nature, because that was his decision, God's decision after Adam and Eve sinned, that death passed upon all people and sin passed upon everyone. So by the time the New Testament rolls around, we learn that we're all born with this sinful nature, and we're corruption. There's not good in us. And our only way out is to believe in Jesus Christ, that he is God's son that came to pay the ultimate price for our sins. There's just so much we're asked to believe. We're asked to believe all of that is true with very little like demonstration or evidence, or, we're just told that from a book, one book, and that has contradictions, has moral challenges, has uh, uh, prophecies about what the Messiah is supposed to be like in the Old Testament and the New, and Jesus was nothing like that. So that all changed. We're told, that the laws forever for all people, and that even in the new heaven, uh, in the Old Testament, we're taught that the law will still be there and there will still be sacrifices. But then we're later taught in the New Testament that law is done away with, and it was a temporary schoolmaster, and that Jesus is the ultimate. Jesus is the ultimate sacrifice. So we're taught all of this stuff, and we're asked to believe it. And if a person just considers that and hears all that and says, there's just a lot in there that doesn't ring true or is contradictory or seems really sketchy on some of the moral issues, and that's supposed to be the God of the universe, and he's making some of these moral calls about slavery and grape, using grape as a punishment, uh, and you don't believe it, not maliciously because, oh, I don't want to be under that, but you just start to really wonder, gosh, is this true? And if you don't, according to the book, if you don't believe, you are choosing the one of two options. You either believe this and you go to heaven and all is good, or you disbelieve and you go to um, hell. And whatever hell is, and again, if you talk to uh, different Christians, everyone's going to have a different interpretation from hell. It's going to be everything from um, eternal separation from God, which I think is a newer thing where it's, I think, trying to soften it. But usually if you press on that, well, it's, yeah, eternal separation from God, and God is love and God is good. So you'll have an eternity where there's no love and nothing's good. So yes, punishment eternally. And that would suck for anyone to be somewhere where there's nothing good ever and there's no love ever. That would be a horrible punishment forever. Like a billion years goes by and it's just getting started because it's eternal for not believing. And it comes back to that whole idea, is belief a choice? Can I really make myself believe something even if I know the punishment or the penalty is huge if I don't believe it? I think I can pretend to believe it or act like I believe it or say I believe it, but in my heart of hearts, can I really if I just don't believe it? If the evidence is not there to convince me that it's true, I just don't know how someone's supposed to make that decision. And that's where thinking, I had never thought that way as a Christian, and about that. I thought about some of those kind of things, but never about that specifically. And it really makes a lot of sense. And I think it became much more of an issue to me as I found myself in that position. So, of starting to not believe. So, um, for those of you who have heard or know me or my background, I was raised as a Catholic, and always had an understanding that God was real and just believed that. Of course, I was told that, ever since a small child, as long as I could remember. And I went to church, and, just everyone in my family and extended family believed in, they were all Catholic. And, even though there was some crazy stuff going on in behavior and stuff and that kind of thing, that was part of the deal too, is, oh, this must all be cool with God because everyone here believes in God and we're all, all this stuff is being done. But gosh, God is real and we all believe in him. So that's a little confusing. But as I continued to, uh, get older, I talk to God and all the time. Now I never heard from him, like, which was always a big question for me, is like, we're supposed to, this is our heavenly Father. He's uh cares about us. He knows our needs and has all of this, has this desire to know us and us to know him, and we're supposed to talk to him and pray to him, but never hear it was all just one sided always. Even where I would make up games like, okay, God, I'm not hearing from you. But I remember being out in my family, or the house where I grew up, in our driveway. We had a basketball hoop, and I would be out there shooting free throws, and I'd be like, okay, God, if I make two in a row, it's a yes. You're telling me yes. And I'm like setting up these scenarios of how to hear from God, and about questions that I thought were important, and I needed that kind of answer from God, but never heard anything. So later, when I became a Christian in my late 20s, I was, uh, it was through a series of year-long searching after already being a pretty strong believer in a higher power through Alcoholics Anonymous. But then friends invited us to a church. I didn't realize it was a Pentecostal evangelical church, but there was definitely a desire for my wife and I. We were starting our family to be plugged in somewhere, to have community. We had never gone to a church, and they were talking about how, gosh, this is real. This is, you could have a relation with Jesus Christ. He's going to be your best friend, and um, gosh, he's just going to be there to comfort you and lead you and guide you. And his spirit comes in and guides you and can give you deeper insight into his word and all of that kind of thing. But I remember myself, I was smoked, and, I was smoked cigarettes. I cursed a lot. I had other things that I was working on in my development as a person. And I really felt like, and it was made known to me, that I couldn't be in this relationship until some of these things were cleaned up. And there was really this strange kind of thing that was constantly laid out there, like, God can deliver you from all this, but you have to believe in him. And again, even back then, I couldn't believe. I wanted it so bad. I would go up to the altars and I would, oh God, I want this so bad. Jesus, forgive me of my sins. And I would weep and cry out, and um, did that for a year, and was just about ready to give up. And, the last night, like, I'm not going to church anymore. There was another pastor there, gave another altar call about Christ. And I went home, and the next day I woke up and I really did feel as if I had been forgiven. Um, and it was significant enough to, like, oh my gosh, what everybody had been talking about and telling me about for a year, and I've been trying and trying and trying, finally happened. Right. And I couldn't really figure out, though, and it wasn't until I looked back later, like, that's kind of weird, that why didn't that happen like the very first time I asked? What was all that? And do remember, like this boiling point of just building and building over a year. Something had to give. Looking back, I think I just felt a release, and my mind gave me the answer I wanted. The only reason I think that in hindsight is because whatever that feeling was, and forgiveness or that warmth or whatever, it didn't ever come back. And I didn't never had that communication or relationship moving forward, even though I used to go with my pastor, and him and a couple other guys would meet at 5 o'clock every morning at church. And this is 5 days a week. We would meet Monday through Friday, and we would meet and pray for an hour together. We'd all get separate. We'd pray for ourselves, for closer relationship with God. And I mean, I prayed so much and sought after God for that kind of relationship or communion or direction. And to be honest, it wasn't there. And I don't know if other people were, how much of that. What I do believe is people can believe they're having that and do the things that look like they're having it. But as far as it goes for me, it wasn't happening. I didn't hear, like, I was never convinced, like, that Jesus was talking to me clearly. It was me talking to me, or me longing to hear something. And yeah, I'd hear my thoughts, but other than that, it didn't happen. Um, in what I found, and I guess to tie it all back to the thoughts, the kind of the thought crimes, is um, that belief. I even as someone And if you would have known me, if you would go back and ask those people in that church, they would all say, we haven't seen a conversion like this ever. And I wasn't pretending. I felt like something really happened. It just didn't last. And then what I did was, but then I was part of the church. And so I'm continually seeking, trying to make these things happen, but I'm already in and wanted it to be real. I definitely wanted that to be real and to continue. And I mean, my life, if anybody looks back, there was dramatic change, but it was also hard to tell because I had already been in AA 5 years prior to that event, making significant changes in my life, working through really practical things like moral inventories. And I went and made amends to all the people I had wronged. I had did a moral inventory and shared it with another, got all that garbage out. I was going through counseling constantly from things going on in my background and or in my growing up and working through things that I didn't wanted to make sure I dealt with and didn't take into my new relationship with my wife, and now we're having children. So I was working on a lot. So what I noticed in church is did I really have a Holy Spirit that was living in me, that was just transforming me and making me something different? No, I had to do it. I I wanted that to happen, but I'm the one that had to not do things that were inappropriate, or when I did things, uh, ask for forgiveness and decide to, whether I was going to make things right. Um, I think that's just being human, and a lot of that was um, credit to the Holy Spirit. Back to the criminal thoughts. So I started having early on those kind of thoughts like, oh, how much of this is real? Like, how much of this is true? And I was also told, the Bible is God's inspired word. So it's inerrant. All the answers to life are in here that has to do with salvation and spirit. I was told everything like from some people like this, every answer you could ever want to know is in this book. Others, no, it's about your spiritual, it talks about salvation and spiritual life. Everything you need to know about that is in this book. But what I was told across the board is that it was inerrant, that there are no mistakes, no errors, and that it's all inspired by God, for godly life, for reproof, for, I forget all the words, but to help me, it's a living word, sharper than double-edged sword, able to uh, pierce your heart and separate soul and spirit and um, really get in there and transform you. Some of it, other parts of it, I mean, some of it was intriguing. Other parts were just really, really hard to understand and didn't make sense. And without learning a lot of context. So I started that down that road. And that's where early on, even though I was a Christian for 30 plus years after that event in 1992 is when I became a Christian. A lot of questions started to come up early because I was reading the Bible. And what I found was some of those kind of things. Like, oh, first of all, it was really tough to have um, ask questions and have thoughts and share your thoughts in church. Not appreciated. Like, certainly wasn't a place where a person, and I'm talking about even in Bible studies or small groups or going to a pastor, you could ask questions, but a lot of times you get the very uh, patent apologetic answers that I already knew because I was reading those books. I was looking into all the available books at the time that dealt with Bible difficulties or challenges in the Bible, seeming contradictions. And again, they were all left me wanting. Um, and the other part was it just the idea of I was it felt like a lot of times I was being asked to check my mind at the door. Like, hey, I understand you have these questions and things aren't making sense to you. But hey, at some point, you've just got to believe. And you've just got to, you've just got to believe and have faith. And part of that big challenge for me that always struggled with that is there, and I hear people talk about it now today more so, that people are deconstructing and thinking through these same kind of thoughts, is that there is not anything that can't be believed if it's based on faith. Faith, you know, uh, if it's just a matter of having faith and believing, even though there's not strong evidence, there's contradictions, there's things that in the Bible that just aren't what I was told they would be. When I was, when I had such a hunger to learn about this new faith I was in, and I was given the Bible, and it's like, you read this. This is going to give you all the answers. And I'm like, I started reading it, and I started reading the Old Testament and the New Testament, and it's like, this has no answers. There's no mention of Jesus in the entire Old Testament was one of the first things I noticed. And the mention that of Jesus or this Messiah that's going to come was not the one that came at all. And I always learned too that it was just kind of a thing, and it wasn't just in the church I was in. This was, I'm over 35 years, attended multiple churches. We've moved and went to Bible college and relocated a couple times where we built a home and changed work. So I've been in different churches, even different denominations. We've been in Baptist, evangelical, kind of just non-denominational, and all have the same kind of idea that the Jews somehow got it wrong and missed it. How did they miss Jesus? Well, reading the Old Testament, I learned that they were told about a Messiah that looked nothing like Jesus. And that was one of those thoughts that became a challenge. Like, how, like, if this is the most important thing that is going to be coming, this Messiah, this deliverer, and is going to set the nation free and establish this kingdom that will always have a Davidic king on the throne ruling here on earth, that the tribes will all be brought back together, and that the temple will be reestablished, that all the world will come and be circumcised and will come, and there'll be God-fearers along with the Jews, and reestablish the Levitical priesthood that will last forever. Well, yeah, if that's what they were being told, and then Jesus shows up, that's completely different. Of course they would miss that. And that was one of those questions, because they were told something different. And that was one of those thoughts too, like, how would really the God of the universe with his people that he was leading through all that just get it wrong or mislead or give them bad information so that they were confused, and then when the true Messiah showed up, they would get it wrong because of what they had been told by him? Here, like, I didn't like thinking those things when I started hearing them and started thinking about them. I didn't like thinking about that because of what it meant potentially inside. Like, oh, what I've been told isn't true now that I'm reading it and seeing it for myself. I mean, I've never been told anything like that. Anything like that. I was just told the Jews missed it all, but I don't think they missed it. I think if they did, it was because they were told something completely different than who showed up in Jesus. And of course they would miss it. So that made, it was things like that. And then asking myself to, when I would just, and it wasn't pressing. And that's the other thing I always found, like having questions. And if you went too far, if you wouldn't let it go, it's okay to ask them, but when you get the right answers that you're given that are supposed to be given, you're supposed to stop. Okay, we've given you enough. Quit it. Who are you? Do you think you're smarter than God and his ways are above our ways and how, we're never going to understand him? Then if that's true, we don't know anything. If his ways are so above ours that like pretty simple questions like that can't be answered by a loving father, it really made me start to wonder, is this true? Is this just something people, is this just a religion like other religions that were man-made and caught on? And people love religion. I mean, there's been religion forever. There's always been religion. And I started wondering that because of those kind of questions. Is this true? The other, or is it true or is it not? And it really started to undermine my faith. And I would go through, and the reason I'm sharing this is, uh, if others, you may come across this video and it may resonate, and you may have felt very isolated and alone, wondering, is it just me? And I never liked, because you do feel very lonely if you're in church and you're thinking these things and you can't talk about them. And then, particularly if it's like us, like your whole world had become this church now, your friends, your children's friends, your families, everything you do. We went to church Wednesday night, Sunday morning, Sunday night. It was our life. I led ministries. I started ministries, outreaches to urban areas, outreaches to people in addiction and struggling with sexual addiction. And I mean, I started all kinds of ministries, and loved doing that because I was really interested in helping people. What I started seeing was that the most probably effective thing I've seen that worked to help with people work through things is the 12-step approach that I learned in AA. And it's not because I mean, I hate saying it, but the first three steps are, you got to realize you're powerless, surrender to God, and realize that only God can deliver you from these things. The challenge is those are the first three steps, but all the rest of the steps have nothing to do with God delivering you. You've got to do work, and it's not God doing it. And it was another one of those areas that, the thoughts really started thinking like, okay, you have to believe that that you can't do this alone. And again, it's that self debasement, like, hey, I'm just born this rotten sinner. Like, I don't even have the power to change. I have to believe I'm powerless. And that's a 12-step kind of idea, very similar to Christianity. I am going to hell. I am born a wretched sinner, and I am going to hell. There is no way out of this. I have to come to believe and humble myself and believe that God made a way out for me to go to heaven, and that is to accept the death of Christ and follow him, submit to him, believe him, and then I get out of hell. That's my way out. If not, if I don't believe him, or maybe, like, I'm sure some people believe maybe, but just say, nah, I don't want that. That's harder for me to believe. I think most people just don't believe it because it's a pretty far-fetched story, but they don't believe, and then you're just condemned to hell. Um, Very similar to what I found in 12 steps. In, like, there, the first step is you're powerless over your habits, and you need to come to believe that a power greater than yourself can help you, and you need to submit and ask God to help remove all these defects of character. And then the fourth step is you need to write down all your moral inventory, all the things you've done in the past, all the things that are wrong, all the things you've done wrong, all your most embarrassing, shameful things. Listen, God's not doing that. Like, it doesn't happen. You've got to do that. And then you've got to go share that with another person. someone you trust, and you confidentially, you go over that list and share it with them. And, and now learning more about psychology and just the way people are made, that's a huge burden off of anyone's life if they were to take the time to do that, to write down all those things that in their mind have been separating them from the rest of humanity, making them a horrible person. And you share that with another person, you get it off your chest, and you realize, wow, that person accepted me. And I told these most horrible things to someone else, and the ceiling didn't fall in, lightning didn't strike. Oh, you actually find out other people have done a lot similar kind of things. But again, that was all something an individual has to do. And you find great relief from that. And then it was, then you made a list of the people you had harmed, and with help from other people getting their input, you go and physically make amends to those people. Like I made restitution financially. I did apologies. I went and found the people and tracked them down and did what it took to make things right as far as it is to me with other people. That just helps anybody. But what didn't happen with any of this is God just lifted something from me, like, or delivered me or transformed me. I did that stuff. And I found the same thing in Christianity. So many people, and like one of the really ones that was so obvious in those last few years before I stepped away from church is I led multiple 12-step recovery groups for men on sexual addiction or pornography. And I mean, it was just everybody, it seemed like was struggling with that. So many people. And how many of them just had cried out and prayed the Holy Spirit to remove this and God to remove this. And it's like, well, why isn't that happening? Well, I don't think anybody's listening. I don't think there is someone there to remove it. I think how you remove that and where you found the success again was the same way: writing things down, talking to someone else, making amends, and it starts to relieve some of those habits, that pretty ingrained habits that guys had built up as a release out of that. So again, those were, and as I noticed myself in those last couple of years, like I couldn't tell people, it was getting harder and harder to tell them, yeah, just pray about this and you'll be delivered, you'll be set free. Did that happen from time to time? I mean, you would see it from time to time. And I think it was that thing, this very similar kind of thing, is reaching out to something greater self and just saying, I can't do this, I need help. And there's, in that submission and vulnerability of just getting it out, there is some release in that. And for some people, it's enough to where they feel if their belief and they believe that that's happening, I think they get release from that. And then if they don't put things in place and change their habits, so often you'd see people go back into that. And I don't think it's because they're backslidden or God didn't work. It's just not, there was nothing there releasing them from it. It was just a temporary release. So, as I, in part of that whole, the thoughts, it was getting, I could not, there were some things that happened with some different situations in the church I was in, and I just could not justify anymore in my mind what I knew the Bible talked about and what it was saying and what we were saying up front. Like, just things that are not true. And I didn't want to lead people down the same experience. So often in Christianity, people become Christians if they weren't raised in a Christian home. Most of the time in America, you're at least open to it because you've heard it. It's kind of in the water, Christianity and Jesus and church and all of that. It's everywhere. So it's not unusual for people to, actually at some point in their life, when they're ready to change or there's a turning point or a hard time to want to make a step. And it's just, it's almost in the culture, like a cliche. If you want to do that, that's what you do, is you go to church. So the fact that that happens isn't a big thing. What's interesting is, so often, same thing that happened to me, is I was told the gospel. I'm a sinner. As I was a new Christian, I didn't understand anything about the Bible. I had not read the Bible. And what was being taught in church was very curated information. I wasn't getting the whole story of the Old Testament. I wasn't, you got the good parts. You didn't get the contradictions. You didn't get the parts where, there's real questionable moral activities from this God. And if God and Jesus are eternal and they're from the beginning, that means Jesus was part of all of that stuff in the Old Testament. You just can't separate it. And it's hard to say, well, now I'm coming across like this, but let's just forget about that other stuff. It would be, and I know people do it, but um, if there's someone who did some really rough things that, and you knew about them, you might struggle saying, yeah, sure, go out with my daughter, or yeah, come over and stay in my house while I'm gone, or something like that. Because even though they may be presenting something different now, it's hard to know someone's changed. And in particular, with the Bible, God doesn't change. It says God's, doesn't change. So all of those things from the Old Testament are the same God as Jesus in the Christian faith. And that's why I started really questioning, is all of this true? And maybe what's more realistic is, just as every group of people pretty much throughout history has this desire to find something bigger than themselves. And I always, like, it's, well, that's an indication there's a God. No, I think it's an indication that we're mortal, in that we realize pretty quickly it's vast. There's a lot of things we don't have answers to, and we die, and life can be hard. I think that's why people have always looked for something greater. The challenge is, any of those things we've attributed to God, we eventually find out it wasn't, or it was different, or things that we thought a God was doing, we find out it wasn't, and it was just people, or physics, or the way the world is, or psychology, or our mind, or something like that. Um, do I so and I was starting to really have those kind of thoughts those last couple of years, and I knew I needed to step down from church, and because I was heading down that road. I didn't know exactly the deconstructing word then, but I did feel that my thoughts were not safe where I was. I couldn't be part of that, obviously, and that is the hard part, and that's what's so um, interesting about this most loving God and loving people in church. It's only if you think like and act like and say like them that you're welcome and loved. If you don't think and act and like them, you're not. I mean, there's a short window where you're allowed not to, but it's got to change. But if you're there constantly questioning, constantly not going along with this, you're not welcome, and maybe you shouldn't be. But it's not like it's. But here's the big news flash. I got a train going by my house. We're pretty close to a train track. Every group's like that. Every group you go to, if you go to any group, a workplace, uh, a guitar group, a theater group, as long as you're part of it and invested in doing what everybody's doing. But once you become the squeaky wheel and all of that, it's the same thing happens. You're not really, don't fit in, and you step away. So that's kind of what happened to me. And then I did learn, I did a lot of my deconstructing on my own. I didn't realize, um, there were places even on the internet at that time, there wasn't like a lot of people doing that. Could be, that's 8 years ago, 9 years ago. If there was, I didn't know it. And so I did a lot of them on my own. Even in my own family and stuff, I was really careful about that. And it was more like, well, we're just not going to church. For me, it was the church thing, but it started to be underlying that it was the God thing. And again, the Christianity God, the way Jesus and God are presented um, in the Bible, is what really where those questions started coming up. And it's funny too, like you are um, back to those thoughts. It's how deeply ingrained that can be once you've been in it. This fear of hell and this condemnation. Boy, you're really screwing up if you don't believe this. Who do you think you are? You're smarter than everybody else. No, I just can't help what I think when I hear things and read things. And if I think a certain way, I can't help it. It's the way I'm designed and the way I think. And when I say designed, I know, oh, you believe those words are so ingrained in me, they slip out all the time. But I don't think I was designed, but certainly the way my mind is wired and the way, for my life circumstances and everything, I can't help it. And so when I hear things like, this is God, the Bible is God's inerrant word. We have 4 eyewitness accounts, Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John, and they all testify. We have more documents than any other work of history. There's, 5,600 some. And then I learned that the bulk of those are from the middle century once the scribal system started and they started copying copies. That's where thousands and thousands of them came from. But as you get back to original early manuscripts, there are none. I was blown away to first learn. The first time I learned there wasn't a original Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John that we had. And here it is. And we just know this is accurate. I was blown away when I learned that there's just fragments and pieces, and there were large windows between the events happening and written down. I was blown away to learn that Matthew and Luke pretty much agreed in scholarship, used Matthew and Mark, or Matthew and Luke used Mark as a source and copied massive parts of it and then just added other information to it. Hey, I didn't know that. I was blown away to learn that this inerrant word written by Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John, we have no idea who wrote it. That those titles were ascribed at a later time as, but there's no indication of who wrote it, and that's just not true. That in that on that information that then even contradicts within it, like, what day was Jesus crucified on, his birth, like he couldn't have been born between the 2 gospel accounts because there's a 10-year discrepancy in there where a person couldn't be born under those 2 times. It just isn't true. And I appreciate it that people make up apologetics for how that works, but boy, it's so flimsy to me. And then I go back to, okay, this is the God of the universe that is supposed to be the supreme being and the loving Father of us all, that doesn't want anyone to perish, and all of our lives depend on this, us believing this information, and this is what we get. It really stretches at incredulity. It really is hard for me to believe. And not only that, well, he wants you to have faith. And that whole question, then back to the thought criminal, or having criminal thoughts, faith cannot be a better method for determining what's real than truth. Honesty is better than faith. Truth is better than faith, because you can believe anything if you have enough faith, anything. Like people have believed that um, uh, white people are superior to brown people, and they believed it with all their, and they believed it. What, there wasn't facts, there wasn't demonstration. We know that's not true now. It was believed that men are superior, not in strength, but just women were less than. Women were at one point in the Old Testament viewed as property. Based on what? Faith? Like, that's not truth. Women aren't property. Women aren't less than men. It was believed that uh, slavery was okay in the Bible. God believed slavery was okay. And Jesus believed that slavery was okay. And we know that's not, we know it's not okay. We know it's not okay. Um, so, but you can believe it. You know, if I'm asked to just believe and have faith that somehow that stuff in the Old Testament that's incriminating or really questionable about a moral God, uh, okaying those things, and you just got to believe that His ways are higher than His purposes are higher. That's belief in place of truth and just understanding what's on the pages and what's being told. And that's okay if someone can do that. I can't. And it's very hard for me to believe that, um, let's say there is a creator that really has that mind that could create the intricacy of this world. Um, but then when it comes to believing in him, he wants it to, when there's all these questions, he's that detailed, but he wants you to just forget the details and believe. Hard for me to believe. So, here I am now, uh, at a place in life where, I have stepped away where from church, from Christianity. What I do believe is that I don't know what's out there. I don't know. I do know if there is a God, and he doesn't want me to know him, or hasn't gone out of his way to make himself known to me or to anyone else, as far as I can tell. So I don't know if it's that important. And is there something more than, is there a soul? Is there something like that? Maybe it will be demonstrated that there is, but like so many things where, those things that are related to our minds and our thoughts and that kind of thing, we're just learning so much more now with, imaging and, uh, the understanding of, neurotransmitters and chemicals in our head and all those kind of things, that the brain does. All that stuff takes place within the brain, because if the brain's altered, there's not a spirit that somehow kept pristine, uninjured, and intact. No, if the hardware gets damaged, so does that. Our like our personalities change. Our that who is supposed to be our essence, our soul, can change based on, uh, chemicals, wound, wounds, head injuries. So we're learning more and more again, and so many of the things that were credited to as the devil and demons, and we're finding out a lot of those things can be dealt with and cured with, therapy and talking through things and unraveling, how life's affected you. I I don't want to say that there is nothing, because is it possible? Absolutely, it's possible. But we tend to keep finding out in these areas more and more that there are naturalistic explanations for things that we know. Well, do we know it all? Absolutely not. We know like a million times more than we did even 1,000 years ago? Absolutely. In the biblical times, everyone thought the world was flat. God of the Bible thought the world was flat. Jesus thought the world was flat. And we know that's not true, right? Um, so we learn more and more, but somehow saying those things out loud is a problem. And I find that to be a big problem. If there is a loving Father, an Almighty God who created and designed us just the way we are, then why would I ever think this way if it's going to separate myself from Him? And in closing, like, or just not in closing, I'm just been talking because I'm filling in for Jess, but another one that really started to trouble me, thinking through the process of how that first couple, Adam and Eve, were created, didn't know what sin was, because sin had not entered the world until the fall. So they did not know right from wrong. They didn't know, they didn't have the knowledge of good and evil. Um, sure, or had they listened to God, that's maybe all they knew. We don't have a lot of information, but why would they not listen to Him? Why would they not listen to Him? There's not right or wrong yet. And it says the minute they ate the fruit, they had the knowledge of good and evil, right and wrong. And that's where the apologetics get into, well, oh no, it wasn't good or bad. It was right, or, like, it was the knowledge of good and evil. So it was something much more deeper than that. But of course they knew that it was good to listen to God. But that's not what it says. It says that they did not know. And that's probably why when a talking serpent came up to them, who, by the way, I always just assume that was Satan, and there's no indication anywhere that that's Satan in the Old Testament. It wasn't until later, looking back, and the story needs to fit, that you but if you can do that after the fact, it's anything can be made to fit something. And even if that was true, that they disobeyed, for the consequence to be for all people from then on to now taste death. I mean, there was no other option for the God who is the loving Father of people. There was no other option than to make them sinful so that all their ways would be wicked. So they got so wicked that He had to flood them and drown them all. But that wasn't people. That was made and done by God, because He made that the fallout of Adam and Eve's eating the fruit. And then it passed all the way down to us today, that we're just, this is the condition you're just born into, and you have two choices: to, I just spit on the microphone, to love God or die. And to love God, accept Christ, believe all of this, no matter what your mind is saying when you read and think through it all. You either have to believe and go to heaven, or you will be eternally some way punished. And that's like, and in free will, we talk about, I hear that talked about often. Well, there has to be free will. It's not free will if there's coercion. Like, if it's love me or follow me or burn forever, that's not free will. Free will is if there is no coercion involved. You can just make a decision, and there's no, it's just completely up to you. There's no outside force influencing that. Because as soon as there's an outside force influencing your decisions, uh, forget free will. Your free will is being coerced by a very severe threat. Um, so that kind of goes out the window. So, again, if this is, my hope is that someone that's following these videos or watching these videos would see this and be encouraged. Because if you're looking at these and you're listening to them for the reason of you're trying to figure out how to go through this process, I'm just here to let you know you're not alone. There was a time early on where I was just so, to even think these thoughts were just so scary. But I thought, like, God, now, am I in a cult or something, that I am in a situation where my mind naturally goes to these thoughts and I'm too frightened to think them? Okay, that was a huge red flag for me. Like, you can't think about these things. And why? Well, because you may think differently. Oh my gosh. Or you may find out you don't believe something you've been told. Well, that's exactly what any belief system that wants to keep your thoughts in place. That's how one of the ways they do that. Don't give the devil a foothold. If you think those things, you're opening your mind up to the devil. Well, what if you're just looking at reality and you have these questions? Like, again, that goes back to, in my mind, an all powerful, loving father that does not want you thinking. There isn't a question my kids could ask me that is going to, well, nothing's off limit. And hopefully I would be a person they would be able to talk to. And if I didn't have the answers in, uh, they may think differently, and that's what so off they may end up choosing something different. And that's fair. And that's what happened so often to myself, having these questions, going to the people, I'm not getting these answers from God. And I'm in the ones I'm getting from apologists or uh, just very unsatisfying, and usually land on, well, you have to have faith. And it goes back to that whole thing. Like, it is, you can literally believe anything if faith is the criteria. There needs to be something more. Um, so it's about 5 till or so. I'm going to go at 7 till. I've been talking for quite a while. I'm going to go ahead and wrap up. And I'm not sure if Jess will be here next week. And if not, I will do one more solo. And then when Jess gets back, we really had fun just going through Bible difficulties and challenges and kind of quizzing her. So we may do some more of that. So have a great week. Hope your summer's gone really well. And there we go. And I'm going to go ahead and sign off. Peace.